Hey guys, Zangetsu 134 here, bringing you another Kamen Rider Zio review. This time, episodes 3 and 4, the X8 episodes. So, as I said before, in my last vlog, I've decided that I'm going to do, each, um, each episode of Zio, in a two-episode vlog, just because each episode is its own, is a part of a little mini arc. Basically, each an arc introducing the previous rider and what's going on with them. I'm only gonna really talk about the half episodes if they do really something really important. For instance, in episode 4.5, they explain or that basically that there are basically now two riders, and that one disappears and replaces the other when Zio takes their powers. Well, for instance, the fact that Hiro and Emu clearly don't remember that they are riders, and basically this is a timeline in which they didn't become riders, so they're basically they're basically now different people. Slightly different people. Basically just people that weren't turned into Kamen Riders, more or less. Where's it going with this? Oh, and the other one is more or less just meta humor. Like, they make jokes about how, like, they could stop the series from happening by talking to the director to change it, or... Sorry. Or by... in Gates' idea of eliminating the producers, and then or Sougo's idea, he's like, we'll just blow up Toei Studios. I was like, whoa, man, it was really meta, but I found it real. That one was actually really funny to me. I thought I had a lot of fun laughing at that. So anyway, this arc we meet the time jacker Aura, who usually finds people that into Kamen Riders that more or less they're going to have something tragic befall them in the timeline, and she'll change something for them, usually something tragic, and then she'll basically say, if I do this, you have to do something for me, and more or less it's become another rider. In this case, she turns this guy into another X-Aid because his child is dying. We find out in the second half that it's due to some disease which is causing his heart to fail. In fact, Hiro even says that in the current timeline, this is of course in 2016. In the current year, the little boy is basically not going to make it because they didn't find out soon enough. Like, Hiro says if he had came in like at least a year earlier, he would have been able to perform a surgery that would have at least kept him alive long enough for them to get an organ transplant. So now he's no longer even going to have the ability to get an organ transplant. And so we find out, which we don't find out until much later, that he becomes that while he is another X8, he's actually more in control than the guy who was another build. It kind of seems like when Wool transformed that basketball player into another build, he wasn't nearly as in control of himself, and in fact, it seemed like he was more turning into a monstrous version of like Sento as build than being his own person. In this, the father is actually hunting down people that try to play more or less a bizarre, like a modified version of Mighty Action X, which he makes unplayable, and only when people get a certain distance in does he attack them and use his powers to put the person into basically a coma, which we find out later is because he's actually looking for someone the size of his son because then their organs will be the same size, and then he'll make someone lose their heart for him. Which you find out that Emu actually figured out, and was actually hunting him through the game using the power of the game driver and a backdoor that he found into the game, which is the Konami code, which I thought was kind of cool. I actually like that they make it the Konami code, and is trying to convince him to stop doing this and just, be by his son's side so that he can at least maybe help keep him alive. Sougo and the others don't find this out until the second half. I more or less am explaining it just because it's easier to explain the arc or the storyline about the Another Rider, right now. And I actually thought it was kind of interesting to actually give the guy who's turned into another X-Aid this backstory. So while this is all going on, Sougo is trying to, go to school and live his life normally until, another rider attacks. While doing so, he's being stalked by Tsukuyomi and Gates, constantly watching him, which was actually pretty funny, just because he's trying to have a normal life and they keep constantly following him everywhere. I assume they're actually using Tsukuyomi's magic tablet to figure out what he's doing, where he's going. One of my favorite parts being where Sougo tries to go to the bathroom and Gates is in the stall. Sougo just disappears, and I almost wanted him to be like, "Look, I get that you're watching me, but could you at least let me be in the stall by myself?" I don't know. But then again, I'm not Japanese, so I don't know. Maybe even knowing he's in there is not a polite thing to do. I don't know Japanese bathroom etiquette. But eventually he does get away from them and hides in the supply closet in the gym, where he finds out one of his friends skipped school so that he could play this unbeatable version of Mighty Action X. And so Sougo gets involved there with the plot because another X-Aid comes and attacks Sogo's friend and puts him in a coma. So Sougo tries to play the game, and of course he's not able to play it because he's not the Kamen Rider that plays video games. I actually realized that pretty much every episode he's going to try and do something that a Kamen Rider can do, but fails spectacularly because he's not them. And so he has to gain the power of the riders so that he can gain that skill. In this case, it's video games. So Sougo tries to play it to find the other rider, and Gates is trying to keep him out of it. But it seems that he's slowly realizing that he wants to help people, and it's more or less what we're seeing is basically the arc for Gates, where not only does he try to learn that Sogo's not. So there's a chance that instead of killing Sougo, that he can, maybe keep Sougo from going down the path of becoming the Demon King Zio, instead become, a good king. We also see that Gates has to realize that he's a Kamen Rider and he has a duty to use his powers to protect people and deliver justice. Basically, saying that that while he sucks at the game, they need to find someone who can beat the game. And we actually get a really funny moment where Sougo asks if Tsukuyomi's ever played video games, and Tsukuyomi's like, "Well, yeah, but I've never played one where you actually touch the controls." In reference to Back to the Future, that scene where he plays the cowboy game. And he uses the gun, and the kids are like, "Oh, I gotta use your hands? It's like a baby's toy." That's one of my favorite. But I love it instead of doing the baby's toy thing. Sogo's like, "The future is awesome." I'm like, "What? We have virtual reality games. Just because you're not using your mind in them doesn't mean that they're less using actual button controls." But yeah, basically they try to figure out a way to get in the game. Sougo goes hunting for this mysterious gamer Emu after Tsukuyomi's like, "Well, yeah, you should find him because he can beat any game." Eventually finding more people that have gotten attacked by um, by the another X-Aid, and when he tries to figure out a way what hospital they should go to and call the doctor, Waz appears and tells him, "Oh, they're going to this hospital, and it's important to your quest to become the king." And more or less, it's basically Waz in this episode is more like he's just here to be like, "Oh, you're on the right track, my boy. You're going to become the king." I find it interesting that while like Sougo is trying not to become a malevolent king, he does still follow Waz's directions and such, and it still leads him on the path to getting like the rider's powers, which is interesting. Sorry. But so Emu goes to the hospital with this guy that he finds, and then Tsukuyomi and Gates find him, and they ask if he found Mysterious Gamer M. And so no, they had not, but they do hear of a couple of nurses talking about how the pediatrician Emu hasn't showed up, and it was probably because he stayed up all night playing video games. He didn't show up for work. And so they realized that, his name is Emu, who he could be Mysterious Gamer M, which leads them to go talk to the pediatricians to try and figure out where he is. And of course, in doing so, they run into Hero, aka Kamen Rider Brave. Although he's not really brave in this. In fact, he's a lot nicer than Hero ever was in anything else. And so basically, they talk about how they are looking just for someone to beat a game who can't be played, and they get into the plot at this point where basically they find out about X8 or another X8 has been turning people in or putting people into comas for like at least I think a month. Eventually finding the cheat code to get into the game from a note that Emu left because he went to go investigate the game and figure out why everyone has slipped into a coma that plays it, leaving a backdoor code so that if someone needed to find him they could, which is actually interesting because he leaves it in German, in which Gates points out that there was a point in Japanese medicine where they actually used a lot of German in their medicine notes, which I thought was interesting. Even though I find it weird that it was Gates who points that out, since Tsukuyomi is usually the one that's their information expert, since she uses her tablet to figure out stuff. I think it's also kind of trying to imply that Gates is something of a gamer himself, and so he uses those skills to try and help Sougo get into the back door of the game, which we find out the backdoor password is basically the Konami code, and then you press all the buttons at once after you input the Konami code. And so at this point, we get a lot of really interesting moments with Gates that he's trying to not become involved, but he gets involved anyways. A lot of this being like because he doesn't want more people to die. And I think he's impressed by Sogo's feelings of like, I can't just like, I know like I shouldn't get involved because we'll lose more Kamen Riders, but at the same time, I can't just sit around and do nothing while people get hurt. Which I like, and it in my opinion, it proves why Sougo wants to be a king so badly. He wants to be a king because he could be someone who a king is someone who should protect his people, and someone who can while maybe not having the greatest skills, brings people together and helps them see that how they can help each other and how they can uh, gather the resources together to protect each other and create a better society. And in a lot of ways, that makes Zio the potential to be a good King Kamen Rider, because he gathers the power of all the riders together so that they can protect people throughout all time. Which I think is what they want to, is I kind of think where they want to go with what Zio should be. And so he eventually, though, like, Sougo steps on a raw nerve with Gates and basically says, do you even know what it's like to watch people get hurt and be able to do nothing? And of course, and this is the big story arc for Sougo, is that he learns about their past and why Gates is so intent on killing him, and it's because he watched Oma Zio kill everyone he cared about just because they tried to stop him and tried to change the future for the better. And they failed, and so Gates gained the power of a Kamen Rider so that he could go back and prevent that future from happening. Which he talks more about with Tsukuyomi in the next episode, which I'll get to as we get there. So they get into the back door, and so they end up in Mighty Action X, which is this random warehouse. I don't know, it's weird. And they run into to another X-Aid, and they get into a fight. Tsukuyomi tells them, even if you do defeat him, he won't. There's a good chance he won't stop. And so Zio's like, yeah, but we can't just let him stay. And and there's a good chance we managed to like put down another build for a few moments. Maybe we can figure out. And so basically, like they're like, we can't do nothing. Plus, we don't know what timeline to go defeat him. And I think basically, if we defeat him here, we might be able to find a clue as to where we should go and how to stop him. At least that's my interpretation of why they're fighting him now. And so, although to be fair, each another rider has their date on the timeline where they, from when the Kamen Rider debuted. In my opinion, they should be well, why don't we just, see the date on them, and that's where we need to go. Because basically you only can defeat them in the timeline they appeared in, like at the beginning of the timeline. And also mainly, you have to defeat them using the power of the rider that they were based on, which they figure out here. It's more or less implied that Sougo didn't completely figure out that you need to have the power of the rider that the other rider is trying to take in order to defeat it. In fact, I think he figures that out because X-Aid's able to get a few good hits in on another X-Aid before his power fades away due to the Time Jacker's influence and the another rider circumventing them and taking over their power. Which I thought was actually pretty interesting. And so, where was I going with this? Okay. And so, they defeat him. Gates helps out using his second ride watch that he has, that of Kamen Rider Drive, and the two of them, and in conjunction with using the Vild ride watch, is able to defeat X-A long enough to see that there's a person inside. And this is the first time Sougo has seen that there's a person inside. Which, to be fair, I think it kind of depends on whether, actually, no, I don't think he ever saw that there was a person inside another build. And in fact, I think this is the first time Build, and I even think Gates has realized that there is a human inside the other riders. And that's when Emu steps in and is like, no, I can't, you guys need to stop in getting involved. And this is basically because Emu doesn't want anyone hurting him, because he wants to try and help this guy out, because, his kid needs his dad, and if his dad's there, maybe it can strengthen his heart enough so that the little boy will wake up, and maybe they can help him. And so he gets involved and starts fighting them until basically Aura shows up. Aura being the time jacker of this time around that's getting involved, as Wool was the one who created another build. I think basically they're going to go through the three time jackers are going to each get their own episode. Like they'll each take turns creating another rider to fight Omazeo for the crown. And she basically tells them, I'm finding people that whereas Wool finds people that's going to disappear or that die in the timeline and, give them bargains that they'll live. Wool makes people form a contract to become another rider in exchange for them doing something for them in the timeline. In Wool's case, saving the father's son from dying. And so she turns him into another Xaid, and in doing so, it causes the riders and Tsukuyomi to be ejected from the game. And so, basically, Emu asks them to help, and so, Emu tells him stay not get involved because he wants to help the father his own way. And the others don't, and he doesn't want the others getting involved because someone can get hurt. Gates, in fact, also tells Sougo he doesn't want them getting involved. And basically, he goes back in time to 2016 because Emu spills when exactly this happened. And so he takes his time machine back in time to the episode in which Brave debuted, because it shows him and Xaid fighting the dragon priest bugster that he fought in his intro episode. And in fact, we actually see the part where he defeats him. And in that point, Gates' time machine appears to them, and he tells them about what's going to happen and how he's from the future, which they seem to believe actually pretty fast. I mean, to be fair, when your bad guy of the season is sentient video game computer viruses in the shape of video game bosses, I mean, it's pretty easy to realize that you're living in a very strange world and time travel is probably possible. So Gates goes back in time to defeat the time jacker and the another rider there, so that in the hopes that he can prevent Sougo from gaining another rider power. Which unfortunately still happens anyways, but Gates tries. So Sougo at this point, talks to Tsukuyomi, and she explains about Gates and Tsukuyomi's past, his future, and she goes back because she wants to help prevent the future without causing any bloodshed. I guess probably because even though Tsukuyomi hates Omazeo, she's met this Sougo and he's nothing like Omazeo. So she believes that they can, have him go down a different path and become a kind king, and a king that won't destroy their world. Which inspires Sougo because she wants to save everyone so badly, she'll even try to save the person who's causing her pain. Even if it means, he'll turn into a monster. He could potentially turn into a monster. And so this is when they meet Xaid and they meet the father, who can, I guess, more or less like phase in and out of being another Xaid, at least in the game world. And so he talks to Emu and another Xaid and realizes that they're all just trying to save someone. And it's just that another Xaid's methods are wrong. And Xaid himself even wants to save this man, even though he's putting people into comas. And in feeling this inspiration, he decides, I'm going to go back in time and help no matter what, even if it means taking another rider's power away. I want to be able to find some sort of semblance of protecting people no matter what, even if it means letting myself get destroyed to prevent a terrible future. And so with that resolve, he uses the time machine to go back to 2016. Before actually he gets that far, Waz shows up in the Iguana Ghost Striker from Ghost, which he turns into his own version of the time machine, which I thought was interesting because it kind of shows that like the time machines can be altered to turn into different rider artifacts that were used as vehicles. We From the magazine scans, apparently there's a Suika Arms ride watch, and of course Suika Arms being the watermelon arms that turn into a mech suit in Kamen Rider Gaim. So there is a good chance that there's an Iguana Ghost Striker ride watch that Sougo will get later that he can use to turn the time machine into the Iguana Ghost Striker. Granted, it shows up as Captain Ghost, the pirate ship that it normally is until it turns into the iguana that Ghost could link his bike into to become the Iguana Ghost Striker. But I more or less just call the whole thing the Iguana Ghost Striker. And so it turns into this weird mech version of Captain Ghost, and him and Sougo fight each other for a little bit using their time machines. In fact, he henshins into X8, which gives the time machine the watch head shaped like X8. Basically implying that like as long as X8 is like himself in there, it's like a mech version of X8. And so he manages to damage Will's time machine enough so that he can escape into 2000 to go into the time stream so that he can go to 2016. In doing so, it proves to Will that he truly is Zio. I found that interesting that he actually tried to stop Zio, since it seemed like the Timejackers were at first were kind of fighting against each other as well as Omazeo, basically wanting their rider to become king. But here it seems that Will is at least willing to help Aura so that X8 can subvert his will another X8 can subvert his will over the real X8 and truly become another rider. And so he gets into the timeline and meets up with Gates and X8, who are having difficulty fighting another X8 simply because he has power control over gaming, and he has the ability to use that power to effectively just trounce Gates, because his skills are just more powerful than Gates is with. Basically, he needs an X8 ride watch. Like, even using like the drive and ghost ride watches are doing nothing against him. And it's about this point that Emu intervenes because he thinks that the Bugster is actually just copying him, or is a copy of him, which I thought was kind of interesting just because of the fact that there are so many different X8 variant suits in X8. You have Cronus, you have Genmu, and how they basically are using variants of X8. The fact that Dangerous Zombie creates an X8 suit. And so he intervenes, eventually losing his powers, but due to their bond, Emu was finally allowed to use the X8 ride watch, which the Emu in 2018 gave him, because apparently, like, he said someone lost it. He couldn't remember how he got it, which of course, implies that at the end of the episode, Sougo gives him a ride watch that'll eventually turn into the X8 ride watch, in the 2018, and so he'll go back in 2016, basically creating a stable time loop that shows that Sougo always had to go back and give each rider their ride watch so that he can use their powers to fight against the other riders. And so basically in Zio showing up, Gates is like, I told you not to come, and Zio's like, no, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna help people no matter what. And Gates is like, but do you want to become a Zio? And so Zio's like, no. And I'm not worried because I believe in you, Gates, and I believe in Tsukuyomi. I believe that you guys will keep me from going down that path as much as, mostly because A, I don't want to go down that path, and B, you two will be here to help me not go down that path. And even so, if it seems like I do, I know you'll stop me. And so, through that, he inspires both Ex-Aid and Gates, and so he's able to use the Ex-Aid ride watch, and so becomes Kamen Rider Zeo Ex-Aid armor. Which of course Wash shows up for and is like, rejoice! It's the birth of my king, and so he gained the power of yet another rider. And so he uses the power of the Ex-Aid ride watch to gain the ability to use the gaming powers that each rider possesses. And is able to just trounce another Ex-Aid. And in fact delivers his own finisher, which is the critical time burst. Which I love because like it actually does, it shows, like how with each Ex-Aid rider it always shows the critical, or the something, the mighty critical finish, or like, the Tado critical slash. And it would show the effects and like, the name of the game and what the colors of the attack will be. With showing the rider who's using it, and B, the weapon that they're using. In this case, it's the Geshikan Breaker punching gloves that the Ex-Aid armor uses, and of course Zeo in his Ex-Aid armor. But I love it because he notices that the box, like the overlay, and so he's like, what's this? And then he smashes it, and it becomes what the energy for the attack, turning into these lines and like kanji, which I thought was kind of cool. And follows up with he uses katakana for his weapons and finishers, and so it becomes, I will admit, it's kind of like a copy of the build armor, only it doesn't capture someone in the dotted lines. Instead, it becomes like basically just like an energy that Ex-Aid drives through. In a lot of ways, like the Kamen Rider Decades finishers, where like the cards would appear and he would do his finishers through the cards. In this case, the words turning into katakana, and Ex-Aid punching through them to damage another Ex-Aid until he runs into him and delivers a flurry of punches, much like Ex-Aid's Rider Kick, where he delivers a flurry of kicks in a bicycle-like fashion. Only here, it's a flurry of punches, which I love because Emma's like, that's not exactly quite how I did it, but I mean, you kind of got it. And so he defeats another Ex-Aid and gains the power of Ex-Aid through it. Unfortunately, that means Emma loses his powers. But he still saved the father, and in doing so, he actually has him, say, go help. Emu here is a doctor, or in fact a pediatrician. If anyone can help your boy, it's him. Not only that, but he works at a hospital with this amazing surgeon, which we get a scene. Of course, we get a scene of Hiro cutting cake, where he's like, "There's nothing I can't cut," and so the episode ends, and we see in 2018 that the little boy is doing well, and he's and they show him with his dad, going off to go, have fun after school, which makes Ex-Aid, or makes Sougo happy that, even though they lost Ex-Aid, they managed to save the dad and the son. And so he goes back home and helps his uncle make a meal. And so the episode and the story arc ends with Sougo basically telling the two, I went back in time and I did all this because I want to be a good king. Even if the riders disappear, I want to use their powers to help people, and I want to be a good king, and not only that, I feel like if I do turn evil, I know you two will be there to stop me. Which I actually thought was a good arc, and it shows that, Sougo does want to help people, and that's why he wants to be a king. I think it's finally establishing why he's being a king, and through meeting these past riders, it helps him become a better person. and so he should become a good king through that. As well as showing the development for Tsuko Yomi and Gates and what their character arcs will be throughout the season. Tsuko Yomi, of course, trying to prevent the bad future and create a good future, and Gates struggling with the fact that he wants to kill Sougo. So yeah, that was the episode, and the arc, and in my opinion, I thought it was a pretty good arc. I think it's a lot better than the build arc in that it doesn't have nearly as much setup to it. It's more or less, showing us what each story arc will be about. They'll come across a problem, they'll find another rider causing it, and then they have to figure out how to stop it, and learn something from the rider of that season. And so yeah, I think it's a lot better just because there's less setup about introducing the overarching plot of Oma Zio and Zio's quest to not become the Demon King, as well as not having to introduce as much. Mainly, it's introducing another Time Jacker and introducing the arc of what's going on. I thought it had a lot of good stuff to it. I didn't think it had nearly as much bad editing, and I thought the pacing was a lot better just because it actually paces the story arc out, instead of kind of cramming it all into the second half of the arc. I'm really getting interested into what's going on with the Time Jackers and what exactly will happen to each rider and what exactly will go on. And overall, I think we're gonna get a good season. If nothing else, it's going to be it'll at least be fun. It may not be as good as build, but I think it'll at least will be entertaining. I don't think it'll be frustratingly slow or boring like Ghost was, or nearly as bland as Wizard for me. Granted, we're still we're only 4 episodes in. I'm curious to see what'll happen. But if nothing else, I'm at least entertained. And that's what's important with the Kamen Rider. So anyway, guys, I think that's going to be it for the Kamen Rider reviews. Like I said, come back in 2 weeks and I'll talk about the next arc, which is apparently going to be about Kamen Rider Forze. But like I said, stay tuned. I'm sorry it's going to become bi-weekly, but I just think it's a lot easier to talk about the arc altogether instead of talking about each individual episode separately, because I think it'll be more interesting that way. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this week. Stay tuned in the coming days, because I will be having my own... I will be having a review for My Hero Academia 2 Heroes, which I'll have guest commentators with me for. And, just stay tuned, because we've got one more episode of My Hero Academia to come up, and I'm curious to see how the season will end. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it. I'm Zangetsu 134. Thanks for watching, and have a good weekend. Take care.